next lesson. This one is a pretty short lesson. So let's start by reviewing what we learned last time about our vowel teams. Remember, vowel teams are two vowels on one tile, and they make one sound. AY says A, and EE says E. And we said that we see AY at the end of words that we want to have the long A sound. So if we hear A at the end of a word, we're going to spell it with AY. Remember, you cannot just put an A because then it will turn to a schwa sound and say Good. And then we said normally in a multi-syllable word, when you hear E at the end, you would spell it with the letter Y. But sometimes we also use an EE. And if we're not sure which one it is, we should be sure that we look it up. Okay, today we're going to be talking about the long I sound. So I have a word built down here at the bottom. What's that word? Fry. We had that last time. So what makes the I sound at the end of a one-syllable word? A Y, right? So this is the crybaby rule. Fry. So at the end of a one-syllable word, when you hear I, it's spelled with the letter Y. Why don't I spell it with an I if that's what I hear? Well, if you remember last year, we talked about the fact that American words don't end in the letter I. So when you have to spell the sound I at the end of a word, spell it with a Y. Even at the end of a multi-syllable words sometimes. All right, so let's try a couple more of these and look at some examples. All right, I want that word to be supply. What sound do you hear at the end of supply? I, right? Should I spell it with a letter I or with a Y? Well, you already know this because we just said it, right? So it can't end with the letter I, so I have to put a Y at the end to make the I sound, okay? Now the word says supply. So in a multi-syllable word, remember multi-syllable means more than one syllable word, how will you spell the I at the end? Right, with the letter Y. All right, let's look at another example. All right, that word should be July. Go ahead, how would we finish that to make it July? Right, the sound I hear at the end is I, but I can't put an I at the end, so I'm going to put a Y. So July makes it say July. Remember, it cannot end in an I. So if you hear the I sound, you have to spell it with a Y, no matter how many syllables it has. You cannot end a word in the letter I. Okay? Now let's switch and talk about reading. So remember, there are reading syllables and there are writing, or excuse me, there are reading rules and there are writing rules. Some rules help us with how to read, how to pronounce or sound out the words and what sounds they're making. Some help us to know how to spell the words when we hear certain sounds. All right, now let's divide this word. So we're going to start with dividing this word. So I have 3 vowels. So I'm going to have 3 syllables, right? So I'm going to pull the M and the U back that way, push the Y over this way. And then remember, the I is kind of in the middle. All right, now I'm going to start by splitting my letters, my consonants in the middle. So I'll have an L goes one way, the T goes the other. And then remember our rotten letters. So where I would normally go like this, the rotten letter L wants it to go over here, right? So if I had never seen the word before, I'd pronounce it multiply because most of the time at the end, the Y says an E sound. So that's what I'd try first. multiply. But that's not a real word. So I'm going to say it again, but this time I'm going to make the Y and I sound. Multiply. Yeah, multiply. That makes sense. So if you say it, if you're reading a word and you see the Y at the end and you think, well, most of the time it says E. So I'm going to start by trying to read it with an E sound. And you read that word and it says multiply, and you go, that's not a word. That sounds weird. Then try it with the I sound. Multiply. Yes, that's a word. That makes sense. So sometimes you will have to try to sound it out a couple of different ways. Also, do you notice I forgot to move a letter in the right direction? Because over here I have a rotten letter L, and so that T should have stuck with the L. So now I have multiply. So multiply. And I have an I standing in the middle all by itself. And remember that rule, the confident rule, that tells me that that I, even though it looks like an open syllable, it's an I by itself. It says I. So multiply. All right. And I almost forgot the rotten letter rule. So remember the rotten letter rule for that, for the L's. All right. Now, let's do a quick review. If you hear I at the very end of a word, will you ever spell it with the letter I? No. Why not? Because American words don't start with the letter I. And how should you spell it? With the letter Y, right? No matter how many syllables it has. All right, that's the end of our lesson today. I told you it was a very short lesson. All right, so now we have learned AY, EE, and just a Y. So those are the three rules that you should know now and that we're going to be practicing. So the rest of our spelling lessons for this one will actually be you spelling and reading words. So that's the end of me teaching. So the next couple of lessons will be you listening to a word and spelling it, and then me showing you a word and you reading it. Okay, good job for today.